Can you imagine leaving home to go to your babysitting job at only 15 years old and not knowing that you would never return home? If this interests you, then you might want to stick around for this case. It is the case of Judith Hand and the mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance/murder. If you want to know more about this case, please continue watching. They did an investigation. Authorities executed a search warrant. If you want to know more about this case, please continue watching. 15-year-old Judith Hand disappeared on September 10th, 1971, while walking in Farmington, her hometown. She was reported missing after she didn't come home that evening. She was reported missing by her parents. Her body would be found 13 days later in a wood pile, and police are still looking for suspects. For Farmington Chief Richard Caton III and Franklin County Sheriff Dennis Pike, the unsolved murder of a 15-year-old girl in Farmington killed in 1971 still nags at them. And I'm pretty sure, just like any police officer that really cares about the victims and their families in these cases, it would nag at you that you can't solve the murder of an innocent 15-year-old girl, because you know that with each passing day that the chances are less likely that you're going to catch a suspect in a case like this, especially with this case being 48 years old now, and it being so long ago. Technology wasn't back then what it is today, so there might not have been cameras to show where she was last seen, and if there were cameras, I'm pretty sure they're not as crystal clear as they would be today. So I'm pretty sure that the fact that these detectives say that this still nags at them, these are some of the reasons why. Now, it is said that Judith was last seen leaving her home at 2:50 p.m. and she was reported missing later that evening, as I had already stated. And I want to correct something. When I said earlier that they found her body in a wood pile, I want to correct myself and say that they found her in a sawdust pile. So that means that it wasn't technically whole wood. It was just like shavings or whatever that came off of the wood is where they found her body. Now, my question to police and family members and some of her friends that knew her would be, does anybody that you all know that she may have knew, do they work in construction, and could they have had access to that sawdust pile? And is that how they were able to put her there and leave her there for police to unfortunately find 13 days later as she was decomposing? Because that is a good question to ask, and I'm pretty sure the police have already asked that question. And if so, was everybody that worked at that site where the sawdust pile was, were they DNA tested, fingerprinted, and things of that nature? Now, I know that DNA testing was not a big thing back then, so it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't collect DNA samples from any of the workers that worked at that site where the sawdust pile was found, also, which is where her body was found. When Caton got a hold of the file and looked at everything, he read all the information and followed up on tips And then the case was passed to a state police detective, and he still talks to that state police detective to this day. And Pike calls Judith Hand's case the biggest disappointment of his career. And like I said before, any police worth their salt or that really cared about the victims in the line of work that they do would be a big disappointment to them, especially when you have the hopes that he had, like that they would solve the case before he either retired or moved on, with his life. And unfortunately, they still are looking for answers and suspects in this case. Now, when Detective Pike was interviewed and asked to give certain details or specific details about Judith Hand's case, he said out of respect for the family, there are certain details that he would not wish to share, but that does not mean that he does not remember the details. And I hate to be the one to point it out, but it was also mentioned in this article that since Judith Hand's case is so old now, or as it was stated in this article, ancient by now, the likelihood of capturing any suspects or anybody talking, they would have to either confess or, if they haven't already, confessed on their deathbed, even if they're still, even if they're still alive. The only way anybody would know who did anything to her is if somebody were to confess and come forward with that confession. But the likelihood of that happening is almost slim to none, seeing as this case is 40 plus years old. And I don't think that somebody who has gotten away for 40 plus years is going to all of a sudden confess now. Because if they were in their early to mid 20s when they committed this crime, they would be at least in their 60s somewhere now. But if they were anything older than in their 30s, they might for sure not be alive anymore. But stranger things have happened. And I don't know if this is an option, if they have any DNA from this case, to match with like a genealogy profile. They might want to go that route, since that has been helpful in capturing a lot of suspects and solving a lot of cold cases. They might want to look into genealogy, DNA testing or DNA matching, and see if that can help lead to her killer or killers. Because who knows, it may be more than one person. But the police are asking that if you have any information, you call 1-800-228-0857. Again, that number is 1-800-228-0857. You can also leave a tip online at fbi.tips.gov. And you can remain anonymous if you choose to do so.